Thanks everybody for coming. I'd just like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Gurmesh people. I'm a councillor here with the Coffs Harbour Greens, and it is really important. We live in one of the biodiversity hotspots in Australia, if not the world, and we need everybody to be on board when it comes to protecting our forests. Not only because our forests represent an enormous biodiverse world that we need to protect for our future generations, but we also have to make an opportunity here for employment and for future recreation. So thank you to NEFA for coming down here today, to the Bellingen Environment Centre for being so active in this space, for the Forest Alliance Ecology, for making sure that they are also monitoring and looking out for logging practices in our community. Let's really put pressure on the Nationals over the next 10 months leading into the state election. So yeah, thank you very much.
Save the old-growth trees!
Save our old-growth trees! Save our old-growth trees! Save our old-growth trees! Save our old-growth trees! Save our old-growth trees!
All right, so thank you all for coming to this event today to launch of our campaign to save our old-growth trees. Our old-growth trees are under threat across New South Wales. They've been decimated by fires, by logging and by development. We need our old-growth trees. There's 174 species here in New South Wales which are dependent on these hollow-bearing trees, which we have to keep these trees in our forests, wherever they are, in our forests, in a paddock, in the main street of Coffs Harbour here. If there are old-growth trees still in existence, they are vitally important for these 174 irreplaceable native species here in New South Wales. Before the 2019-20 bushfires, land clearing and logging had already decimated our old growth, and since then, since the fires, our wildlife are going into serious decline. Literally billions of native critters have been killed by those fires, and their old growth trees have also been felled and destroyed by those fires. So the Natural Resource Commission, the New South Wales body that reviews the science for nature, have recommended to the New South Wales Ministers that they begin restoring our hollow-bearing trees, and they've outlined a program for saving 8 hollow-bearing trees, 8 old-growth trees per hectare in every hectare of our state forests. So, and also recommendation for saving the next biggest. If they can't find 8 hollow-bearing trees, the idea is to save the next biggest trees, that they can be recruited to become old-growth trees in the future. Now we're just asking for the New South Wales Ministers for Forestry and the Environment to act on the advice of the Natural Resources Commission in this matter. That is, that they should save those 8 old-growth trees and the recruitment trees as recommended by the Natural Resources Commission. Now, why are we here outside Mr Singh's office? Mr Singh is one of the National Party members of the New South Wales Parliament who has been dragging the chain and making it impossible for our native forests to be protected. The National Party, what do we think of the National Party? Yeah, the National Party should look out here. We've just had a federal election where in Cowper, the independents just about took out the local National Party member, and we are now in a situation here where we have 10 months until the New South Wales election comes up, and so the New South Wales government needs to do something to address the genuine concerns of the community and the science that is calling for the protection of our forests, or they've got 10 months before they get booted out, just like our federal government just did. Woohoo! Okay, so we've got to do something now, and what we're asking people to do today is to sign a letter to Mr Singh to ask him to help us to persuade the Ministers for the Forests and Ministers for the Environment in New South Wales Government to act on the Natural Resource Commission recommendations to protect our old-growth trees. So we've got letters here today that we've all signed, and we're all going to take those letters out to our communities and get copies of them and sign them and get them back into Mr. Sigh to be able to have him understand that his community actually cares about this issue and that they're willing to take action on it. The other thing that we're doing is we are all directly sending emails to the minister, the two ministers for forestry and for environment, and asking them to take action on this immediately. You can find that information on the North East Forest Alliance website at nefa.org.au.
So what we've got here is post the fire, the government sensibly commissioned a study and a report from the Natural Resources Commission, which is their advisory body for government policy on the environment, and the NRC came out with a recommendation that the number of retained hollow trees should be increased. There should be recruitment trees to replace them over time, and that the trees should be marked and mapped and saved in perpetuity. What's been happening, of course, as we all know, is they save a few habitat trees in one logging cycle, come back and get them the next time. And so the forest gradually degrades into a stick farm. And so, yeah, the government commissioned a study, the government's got the advice. That ought to be government policy. There's only one more step, which is basically the government agree to implement the advice that they asked for. That's not a big step, but we need to push them to do it.
Well, I was deeply upset about what happened during the 2019 fires in Calang. We saw hundreds of hollow-bearing trees destroyed deliberately by forestry. The vast majority of them was completely unnecessary. So some of the biggest, oldest trees in Calang we saw just chopped down for no reason. Some of these trees were 300-400 years old. Some of these trees were just in hot spots where we've been documenting greater gliders, yellow belly gliders, sugar gliders, glossy black cockatoos. These are all species that cannot breed without hollow-bearing trees, and we've seen them just destroyed during fire operations. And that's happened not just in Calang but across all the fire grounds. And we see it in logging as well, as Tim just said, like the recruitment trees being chopped down, the biggest mature trees which represent the next generation of tree hollows being harvested, chopped down. So, you know, when the current old growth trees are gone, there'll be nothing to replace them.
And we're going to go in now to take those letters to present them to Mr. Sigh, and we'll thank you all for being here and supporting us, and we'll come back out and we'll have further chat later on.
And save our old growth trees!
Save our old growth trees! Save our old growth trees! Save our old growth trees!
Fantastic. That's a great idea. Mr. Sigh is the assistant here in the electoral office has just suggested that we go and pay a visit to Melinda Pavey. That's a worthwhile enterprise. Right, the New South Wales government is overdue to protect our public native forests from logging. By saving our old growth trees now is one important step that they can take to protect the 174 species that are threatened with extinction by the death of our old growth trees across our state forest.